Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about an idea of viewing dreams through a lens called eco-dreaming. So what eco-dreaming is, it's a framework to kind of make sense and interpret our dreams. So before we begin to get into eco-dreaming, I kind of want to do an activity to kind of lay some groundwork to start thinking about and reflecting on the dreaming process. So think back to a recent dream of yours. It could have happened the night before. Maybe a dream happened this week, or maybe it's just a dream that sticks out to you recently that you can't kind of get through, shake, whatever it may be. So, anyway, get back to that dream and think about some details about that dream. Where did that dream take place? Was it in a building, maybe your home, maybe your workplace of business? Or was it someplace in the past, like school? Or maybe it was somewhere outside, like a baseball park, or near a swimming pool, or maybe near the ocean. Think about what type of day it was. Was this at night? Was it during the day? Maybe sun rising, sun setting? Relatedly, what characters were involved in this dream? So, in other words, think about who or what was in the dream. Was there a talking cat? Do we see a friend from your past? Who was in the dreams? And then finally, what feelings and associations come up when thinking about the dream? So feelings is, even thinking about the dream, do you feel some anxiousness, some sense of hope? Then associations means as the more you think about the dream, maybe write the dream down, memories or other thoughts come into play that kind of connect with the dream. So the thing with dream work, and again, this is what we're going to talk about, is eco-dreaming is a form of dream work, or you could say dream analysis, depending if we're talking about a clinical sense or more of a self-help kind of professional growth sense. But essentially, when we're working with dreams, we really can help thinking about the location of the dream, the type of day of the dream, who was in the dream or what was in the dream, as well as feelings and associations with the dream. So any materials that come up as we're working with the dream may give us shine or may shine more light into kind of making sense of the dream or providing some sort of meaning. So as we talk about that, again, this is kind of the framework that we're going to build upon. And now we're going to get more into an eco-dreaming perspective, again, which is one framework we can utilize to help make sense of the dreams. So as I mentioned, eco-dreaming is a framework that focuses on nature elements of our dreams. So going back to the previous components, if we're talking about location, are we in a forest? Are we in a woods? Is there rocks nearby? Really emphasizing the natural elements. So natural elements could be the geology of a location. It could be the elements like earth, wind, fire. It also could be animals in the dream. Now, with that too, it's helpful from an eco-dreaming standpoint. We can integrate this with your standard dream meaning making systems. So if we are focusing on the natural elements, including animals, we can also incorporate symbolism or, dream symbols books, which tend to have quite a bit of animal motifs to it to help us again give us more meaning and make sense of our dreams. So there's two kind of schools of thought from an eco-dreaming perspective. And again, essentially the core of eco-dreaming is viewing the natural elements within the dream. So one, we can take this perspective of eco-dreaming and tie it into that the nature elements in our dreams reflect something about us. This is your kind of classic dream symbolism book. So I'm having dreams about elk or deer. I can look up what those symbols mean, and that can maybe give some sense of who I am, or a part of me that's being expressed in the dream. This individual focus we commonly see in Freudian dream analysis as well as Gestalt dream interpretations as well. Essentially, again, these components of the individual focus, whether it be Freudian or Gestalt, emphasize that anything really that's happening in the dream has some sort of individualistic meaning towards you. Okay. So again, dreaming about a poisonous frog has some sort of representation to who you are as a person or some sort of meaning related to your life. So that's one level we can do an eco dreaming perspective. The next level is more of a spiritual collective focus. And when you hear the term eco dreaming, this is usually what people are referring to. And essentially, eco dreaming is this perspective, this framework that nature itself is communicating through our dreams. So, what I mean by that, when we talk, we can kind of incorporate another classic interpretation of dream systems called Jungian or analytic psychology dream interpretation. And again, essentially, from this perspective, argues that dreams represent our psyche, and our psyche is not just a part of our individual experiences as a person, but also connects something into not just human consciousness. Again, that's classic Jungian collective unconscious perspective, where we're tapping into cultural memories and genetic memories of the human beings or the human race. But another layer, especially when you add eco psychology or depth psychology to this, is that our dreams also may be connecting not just to the human consciousness, but also a non-human consciousness, or more a natural or animal or environmental consciousness through this. So, that may sound very woo-woo, but it may not be that far-fetched. And so, whether it's something we believe or not believe, understand that this is something that's commonly seen and in the ego dreaming perspective. And really, it gets heart to the heart of it is really understanding that within the social sciences, particularly in psychology, consciousness is something that we still are trying to make sense of. And there's a many different schools of thought, there's different debates out there. But what I want to share is that we can take this idea of consciousness and actually incorporate non-human consciousness perspectives into this. There's a lot of evidence or interpretation of evidence that animals have level of consciousness where they're aware of their surroundings, they can communicate with others, they have feelings and interactions with their environment. We're seeing this with growing ideas that this also exists with plants. So, for example, Venus flytraps have been proven, or again, we can make sense of that there's a strong probability that Venus flytraps can count. And so, what I mean by this is that the Venus flytraps is a plant that usually eats or traps flying insects. And so, it takes how the Venus flytrap is activated is little hairs with inside the plant need to be activated or touched in a certain time and a certain frequency. So if the number of hairs get activated within a time period, it will close. Okay. So we're seeing that there's an ability for this plant to count. Okay. Because it's counting movements and it's also being aware of a time frame. So again, some could argue that is a level of consciousness. Additionally, there's a growing, especially within animal ethics, argument that how we defined animal consciousness can be also applied to insects. The more we understand the mental capacities of insects, there may be a consciousness element as well. So essentially, what I'm talking about all this is that eco dreaming gives space to this idea that nature itself could be communicating through our dreams. This is something that we don't necessarily see a lot, especially in Western culture, but there is a large amount of evidence, especially in anthropological research in the social sciences, as well as traditions within indigenous cultures, that how we make sense of our natural environments occur through dreams. So, for example, there's some narrative traditions that certain groups of individuals in indigenous or shamanic communities learned what plants were edible or what plants may have medicinal components through their dreams. There's also stories of um, community members making decisions on when they should go hunting for certain animals based off the dreams that one's experiences. And then, in addition, there's also been stories of individuals finding lost landmarks or even where loved ones have been buried or passed away through dreams. Okay. So whether or not, that area gets into this idea of how that mechanism works, there's a lot of debate on that. But what we see again is that there is a lot of framework of human culture and where nature seems to be, or is at least interpreted, as communicating through our dreams. And when we talk about eco dreaming, that is a very prominent component. So those are just some frameworks we are working with. Whether you subscribe to that dreams come from the individual, or this idea that dreams may have more of a spiritual or collective component, that information or communication about our dreams are happening outside of us. Either way, eco dreaming could still be a perspective of how we make sense of our dreams. So now I want to shift to of eco dreaming is kind of a modern response to emphasize that the history of dreams and the thing with dreams, dreams have been a long part of human culture. Um, and we don't know when the origins of that began, but when we do look at historical documents, written down documents, dreams are a common motif. And then this is something we could never prove, but one suggestion is dreams are probably one of the most written subjects or topics described in the human condition. Okay? Because we see dreams not just in scientific texts, but in literature. And we also see dreams in a lot of religious components as well, as I'll refer to in a little bit. And so when we look at the history of communications of dreams, and again, this is mainly dreams that have been documented in some sort of written form, but we also know there's a long oral tradition of dream work or describing dreams or using dreams as some way to make sense of the world, whether it be prediction or meaning making, whatever it may be. We know this is a huge part of the human psyche or human consciousness. Now, there's what we're seeing too. There's been an epoch shift of the content of dreams. Okay. And this is what kind of eco dreaming has been growing more and more, especially in the eco psychology world, is that when we look again at these written records and these long oral traditions, understandably so, dreams usually contain information about our environment or really reflects our how we view the world. And so historically, then, nature was a common motif in dreams. And this would make sense, especially in we typically have components of our dreams to our day-to-day lives. So we're talking going back about hunting, gathering components. There's a really strong chance, or almost, I wouldn't say a strong chance. It is what it was, is that individuals who were hunting and gathering were dreaming about their hunting and gathering components, their natural components. Even with the agrarian revolution, individuals less relying on hunting and gathering, but more growing their own crops, we see that dreams reflect the natural elements. A good example of this, and again, going back to the documentation, one of the most famous documentations about dreams and dream interpretation comes from the Bible or the book of Genesis. So you may have heard of Joseph and the Technicolor Dream Code, okay? Joseph, I'm not going to go much detail into the biblical component, but Joseph was an individual who had dreams and would share the dreams and interpret the dreams um, to, I think it was the Pharaoh at the time, but it's a story in the Bible. But I want to focus too on the two dreams that are mentioned in the book of Genesis related to Joseph. And we'll see again these natural motifs. And so we have one again from an agrarian perspective, where Joseph dreams that he was in a field building, binding sheaves of wheat, so cutting down a harvest. His sheaf stood up straight, and all his brother sheaves gathered and bowed down to his. Relatedly, we have a celestial dream. And again, these are not all the dreams that Joseph mentioned or the dreams mentioned in the Bible, but Joseph dreamed of the sun, moon, and 11 stars again bowed down to him. So I share that really to emphasize that we know that when dreams have been documented, especially in the past, we have a long record of historically our dreams had a strong connection to the motif of nature. This is where eco dreaming comes into play, is as we'll see now that in modern era, so if you're spending a lot of time analyzing your own dreams or maybe in a clinical setting working on dreams, it is not uncommon that dreams lack some natural elements. Because again, this could reflect just our modern era, especially from an eco psychology perspective. Most people, especially in a Western context, feel a disconnection from nature. So even as work has shifted, right? Now we're dealing with online or Zoom work or distance work or at working at home. Again, even though that work itself is going through some sort of context, many of us are removed from nature, and this reflects a lot of our dreams. That is very common for individuals to have dreams that don't have a lot of natural elements, that take place in buildings or long corridors. You may be familiar with this growing element, or it was very popular the last few years on the internet. It may not be anymore, but this concept of liminal spaces. And this is a photo of an example of liminal space. And I picked this photo because for many of us, this is what kind of our dreamscapes are. They are more modern, more industrial, and less natural. And so eco dreaming seems to be this component of trying to reconnect with nature by really emphasizing and being aware of nature elements within our dreams. So, from an individual psychological perspective, this could help with more reconnecting with natural elements, maybe finding meaning, getting back to connection with nature or again, if we're talking, if we believe in the collective and the spiritual components of this, having dreams that lack nature, again, emphasize another disconnection, unhealthy disconnection. So, eco dreaming is essentially an intervention if it's viewing that a part of mental health is relatedly due to a disconnection with nature, then by focusing on the nature connection with dreams, we may be able to improve one's mental well-being. So now shifting with this, I want to talk about too, and again, this comes from eco psychology. This way of describing environments is a good element to start with making sense of eco dream work, is really being aware of our environments. So this is just a simple framework of how we discuss or could make sense of this. And again, in taking this information and applying it to your own work is being aware of what different environments in your dreams associate or mean to you and what feelings are with this. Relatedly, not just in the dreams, but this idea that different spaces of nature have different meanings towards us. So, again, this can represent our personality or our upbringing or our location, but for example, someone like myself who grew up near water, water itself has a lot of meaning to me. It's actually very relaxing to me. So being around water, in addition to that, I'm also exposed to a lot of green spaces. So blue spaces and green spaces are something that gives me comfort because I'm very familiar with that. Likewise, though, when I spent time in a mountain area, in a desert area, those elements did not feel comforting to me. Actually, made me feel kind of anxious, if that makes sense. But again, everyone may have different interpretations of this. So this is just a framework that we can utilize. So blue spaces just represent some sort of water component, whether it be the ocean, waterfall, a pond. Green spaces is how we categorize lush plains, forests, something with a lot of fauna and growth. Tan spaces is a desert kind of like area. Black spaces refers to the night. Some people really uh, enjoy the night sky. Others looking at the night sky may provide some element of anxiety. Same with caves. Some people find the caves rather comforting. And again, from a Jungian perspective, there's going to be more analysis components of this, where typically caves and darkness represented more feminine energy, and then gray spaces or mountains represented um, more masculine energy. And so if we have a dream where someone is exploring the mountains, and then going through a cave, we have definitely symbols of both masculine and feminine interacting. And then we have red spaces, which again is an environment that uh, what really inspired me to add red spaces is this article I have cited below. But red spaces essentially connects to volcanoes, to fires, to maybe hot areas. But again, it could be a common motif in one's dreams. And so what those spaces mean to that person, feelings associated with that person, or again, if these are areas, like let's say we're not familiar with what it means to live in an Arctic tundra or to have snow, there's always could be areas where we learn more about it, either through reading symbolism books or even science or geology books to really give more understanding of these spaces. So that connects to with some eco dreaming activities, and this was inspired by an article I read. It's rather old. Looking at the comments, came back from 2009, but I don't know when the article was originally posted. But again, I have a link to this in the description as well as at the end of the slides. But some activities we can do to kind of foster more eco dreaming components is one, increasing the awareness of the natural elements in our dreams. So, it's a funny thing with dreams. The more we think about dreams, the more we talk about dreams, probably increases our chances of having dreams, or at least being aware of them. So, increased awareness could just be documenting, maybe keeping a dream journal, maybe bringing up in our own coaching or therapeutic settings, or maybe even talking with a friend. And again, that connects with sharing our dreams with others, but just being aware of either the lack of or the integration of natural elements in the dreams, and then what those elements may mean to us. Really, also give space to note any messages. I, I wrote vote, but I should have been note that nature may be communicating your dream. Maybe we have a talking mongoose in our dream that's telling us something. Maybe we're in a red space, a volcano bursting, but we feel a lot of energy or positivity with it. Just being aware of what is being communicated in that dream. What can also be helpful is creating a representation of our dream. So in addition to writing it down, maybe it's painting a picture, and maybe it could also be kind of mapping out the world. So similarly, what's interesting, we know when we talk about geography or art and nature, we talk about landscaping. Well, also in dreams, we have dreamscaping as well. So we could take what we've been dreaming about, especially the location of that dream, and map it out in a way could also give us more understanding of that dream as well. And then additionally, if the depending on the dream and depending on your own perspective, we can incorporate that dream in some sort of activity or ritual or ceremony. Again, that allows us to work with the dreams, give us more meaning to this as well. And that really connects, especially too, if we view dreams coming from a more collective or spiritual component, we can be honoring the dream through some sort of ritual or ceremony. And then finally, what's really common in eco dreaming is a perspective of sharing your dreams with others. So this could be, again, as I mentioned, communicating with a friend, maybe in a therapy session. We also see too, especially within kind of eco psychology, there's been a recommendation of having eco dreaming groups where individuals share their dreams about, whales or a dream of turning into a wolf or let's say a bear, and then what that was like, sharing that dreams with others. And again, because in certain traditions, especially spiritual, shamanic, or cultural traditions, this was common for individuals to share their dreams with community members. And again, if there's viewing it as something's being communicated, they can make sense and interpret and take some sort of action with that. So, as I talked about that, think about what is one eco dreaming activity that we've talked about, or maybe something new has come to mind that you can incorporate for this week. Maybe you're going to start keeping a dream journal, just being aware of the nature elements. Maybe you recently had a dream about a giraffe, and so you want to explore the symbolism or the biology of the giraffe and what that may mean or reflect upon for you. Maybe you want to share your dreams with other people. Whatever it may be, think about what activity can you do to incorporate eco dreaming for this week. So here's some of the references I talked about. Again, really, if you're interested in learning more about green or blue or red spaces, really want to suggest reading this article that I have on the screen. It's an open access article, so it's free. You don't have to go through a paywall. So again, look more at other resources about eco dreaming and just kind of get weird with it. So I'm going to end there. Thank you all, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.